The Disappearance of Maggie Fletcher in 1919, vanishing into the Smoky Mountain mist. A veil of mist hung low over the Smoky Mountains, twisting through ancient trees and casting long shadows that danced eerily in the moonlight. The people of Elkmont, a small town nestled deep in the foothills, spoke of the mountains with a mix of reverence and fear. Stories of spirits and creatures hiding among the towering pines were common, but those tales were nothing more than fireside legends until the day little Maggie Fletcher vanished without a trace. Maggie was 8 years old, with a wild curiosity that sometimes got her into trouble. On that fateful autumn afternoon, she was playing outside her family's cabin, chasing after a stray kitten that had wandered too close to the woods. Ellen, her mother, called after her, warning not to go far. The thick fog was beginning to roll in, as it often did during this season, shrouding the mountain in a heavy, impenetrable gray. But Maggie, her laughter bright and carefree, darted just beyond the tree line, her red dress disappearing into the mist. When dusk fell and Maggie still hadn't returned, Ellen's heart began to race. She called out for her daughter, her voice echoing through the stillness. When no reply came, panic set in. Ellen hurried into the village, breathless and wild-eyed, alerting everyone she passed that Maggie was missing. Soon, the entire town was roused, their lanterns flickering like fireflies as they gathered into search parties, combing the nearby woods. The men called Maggie's name until their voices grew hoarse, but the forest swallowed their cries. Only silence answered. Days passed, and hope began to wane. The searchers found nothing but a scrap of fabric, red like Maggie's dress, caught on the thorny bushes that grew near Wraithwood, a particularly dense and eerie section of the forest. The mountain folk had long avoided Wraithwood, whispering that it was cursed. The mist seemed to grow thicker there, and it was said that on certain nights, strange lights flickered deep within the trees. No one ventured too far into that part of the woods, fearing they might not return. Sheriff Amos Ridge, a tall, stern man with a deep, furrowed brow, refused to give up the search. He led his team into Wraithwood every day, but they found no other clues. The only sign of Maggie was the red ribbon tangled in the brambles, which Ellen identified as the one she had tied in her daughter's hair the morning she disappeared. Ellen clutched the ribbon in her hands, refusing to let it go, even as the town began to murmur that Maggie was lost to the mountain, perhaps forever. The whispers grew louder as the days stretched into weeks. Old-timers in the village began to speak of the mountain spirits, the fog folk, who were said to lure children away, never to be seen again. Others blamed the old man of the mountain, a shadowy figure who was said to live in the higher, uncharted regions. Some claimed he took children as servants. Others swore he was a vengeful ghost. None of these stories brought Ellen any comfort. She refused to leave the mountain, convinced that her daughter was still out there, waiting to be found. Ellen spent her nights in a trance-like vigil, sitting by the window with a lantern, staring out into the mist-shrouded forest. She prayed softly, her hands trembling as she read from an old family Bible, hoping for a sign, for anything that would bring Maggie home. But the fog never parted, and the forest remained as silent as ever. Then, one stormy night, a stranger arrived in Elkmont. He was a tall, gaunt man with pale eyes that seemed to see right through you. Dressed in clothes that were tattered and old-fashioned, he introduced himself as Nathaniel Gray, a traveler who had spent years wandering the backwoods of the Smokies. He claimed he had a gift, a way of finding lost things, and perhaps lost people. Though the townsfolk were wary of the stranger, Ellen saw a glimmer of hope. She pleaded with Nathaniel to search for Maggie, promising him anything if he could bring her home. Nathaniel agreed, but on one condition: he must go alone. The villagers protested, insisting that the woods were too dangerous, especially near Wraithwood. But Nathaniel was undeterred. He took nothing with him but a small lantern and a leather-bound book, its pages yellowed with age. Without another word, he set off into the forest, disappearing into the swirling mist. Hours passed. The rain beat down on the cabin rooftops, and the wind howled through the trees. The town held its breath, waiting for Nathaniel's return. Days slipped by, and there was no sign of the strange traveler. Just as the people of Elkmont began to fear the worst, Nathaniel emerged from the woods one cold morning, gaunt and hollow-eyed, as if the forest had taken a part of him. In his hands he clutched Maggie's doll, the one she had carried everywhere. Its once bright dress was now tattered and stained, the porcelain face chipped, but it was unmistakably hers. Ellen ran to him, desperate for news of her daughter, but Nathaniel said nothing. His eyes, distant and haunted, refused to meet hers. He simply handed her the doll and muttered, "The mountain holds its secrets. Some things are better left lost." Without another word, he turned and left, disappearing into the fog as mysteriously as he had arrived. That night, as Ellen sat by the fire, clutching Maggie's doll to her chest, she heard a soft knock at the door. When she opened it, there was no one there, only a piece of old parchment lying on the doorstep. Shivering, she unfolded it and gasped. The paper was brittle, yellowed with age, and on it was a drawing. It showed a little girl standing at the edge of the woods, holding hands with a shadowy figure. Beneath the drawing, written in a looping, old-fashioned script, were the words, "She walks with the mist now." Ellen's breath caught in her throat. She knew deep down that Maggie was gone. But sometimes, late at night, when the fog rolled in thick around the cabin, Ellen swore she could hear her daughter's laughter drifting on the wind, soft and distant just beyond the trees. The townsfolk of Elkmont would often speak of Maggie Fletcher in hushed tones. Some claimed they saw a little girl in white wandering near the edges of Wraithwood. Others believed that Maggie had become part of the mountain, a ghostly protector of the lost. But no one could say for sure. And every year on the anniversary of her disappearance, the fog in Elkmont grew thicker, wrapping the village in a silvery shroud, as if the mountain itself was keeping its secrets close. The Smoky Mountains, they said, had always been haunted. To this day, the local townspeople still make journeys into the mountains hoping to get a glimpse of Maggie, but sadly, her disappearance remains a mystery.